Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to congratulate all the women and ladies here and everywhere in the world. Actually, we are an international panel on this special day. I'm talking from Italy, where I teach at the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart, History and Institutions of the Muslim World. And I'm extremely pleased and honored to host this panel. First of all, I would like to thank our distinguished guests, and a special thanks to Dr. Kaisra and the organizing staff of MACFEST, the Muslim Arts and Culture Festival. This panel actually is about women in the Arabian Gulf, women's movements, tradition, and Islamic narratives. So it regards a region which is traditionally known, often known as one of the most conservative and traditional ones in the Arab Muslim world. So we are really looking forward to hearing the view and the speech of our guests from the Gulf, from Arabia. Dr. Mira Al Hussein and Dr. Rafiah Al-Talei. I would like to introduce them. Dr. Mira Al Hussein is a sociologist and social commentator from the United Arab Emirates. She holds a PhD in sociology of education from the University of Cambridge. Her research traces the intersection of politics, culture, and pedagogy. Mira holds a Master of Science in International Relations from the University of Bristol, and she's the founder and organizer of a webinar series about which we'll have the opportunity to talk. Her research interests include Gulf migration and labor, post-oil socio-political transitions, and Gulf women's agency and power negotiations. She's currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oxford, and she will speak from the UK. Then we have our distinguished guest from Oman, a very fascinating country in Arabia, Dr. Rafiah Al-Talei. She's talking from the US, from Washington. She's the editor-in-chief for SADA in Carnegie's Middle East program. Her research focuses on civil rights, women's issues, political developments in the Gulf, and she's a very well-known scholar in Arabia, and she's a journalist. She has over 25 years of experience in Omani and international media networks, and most recently held the position of senior producer in the Public Liberties and Human Rights Center at Al Jazeera Media Network. She has held fellowships at Stanford University, Syracuse University, and the National Endowment for Democracy. Her interests are very much on women's rights, women's issues, and so we are looking forward to hearing her speech and talk about her experience also within the political sphere, as she is a former candidate for parliament in Oman, Majlis Ashura. So we have the representatives of two countries, two Gulf Arab countries, GCC countries, the United Arab Emirates and Oman. And then we also have our distinguished guest, the Hajj Sharif of Greater Manchester, Mrs. Lorraine Worsley-Carter, who will speak after the two guests from the Gulf. So thank you very much for being here. I won't take any more time. I'd just like to add a few words on the topic, because actually, as I said, the Gulf region is traditionally known as a quite conservative one, and yet you know that the region has been has witnessed important development, an important development process at the economic level and at the social level. So women have been much more and more involved in the public sphere. So we can actually, I look at the process from a Western, from an Italian perspective. And I've been focusing my research on the Gulf region for many years. So the process and its evolution has been extremely impressive for me as an external observer. And I can imagine for the people, the women who lived it in this last decades. This last decades marked by huge developments in education, the educational sector. And so we see that there has been a rise of feminist consciousness and movements with this consciousness in an era which is the cradle of Islam, of course. And there are, of course, many challenges, but some of these challenges, I think, are also shared by us. That's why our panel is interesting, because it involves both women from the Gulf, from Arabia, and from the West. And we have this opportunity to exchange ideas. This is a special day. Tell us something about your experiences. So I'm looking forward to hearing the three of you. And I give the floor first to Dr. Rafiah Al-Talei. Okay. Since your experience as a journalist has been a very important one, start from your perspective. How do you see the rising involvement of women in the public sphere, in the labor market, and in particular in the media sector, and how your interest in women's rights has been growing? Thank you, Rafiah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for this invitation and giving me this opportunity to talk about myself and women in Oman and generally in the Gulf. So this is very interesting question, and I think I need to start a little bit with myself as a journalist. So I don't know why I wanted to be a journalist, but I think the main idea when this thing came to my mind that I needed to say a lot of things that I'm not allowed to say. And I thought by saying everything, I might change something. And but that it wasn't a very developed idea, because it started when I was like in the 7th or 6th grade. I like writing. I liked reading. So I was reading all the time and writing, and keep my writing for myself. But then I know there are a lot of things, whether related to women and related to myself or girls, let's say, or related generally to issues happening in front of me in my small community. And I thought I need to say something about them. But then I realized that, yes, it's more than passion. It just things happen all the time to me and to other girls, and discussions and a lot of opinions that always made me feel as a girl that I am less than a boy anyway. There is something about being a boy so special that I don't have as a girl. And that was at very early age. And it was annoying because I thought, why they think all these boys around me, like my relatives, my siblings, are better than, for example, than me just because they are boys. I was the like the good student who have a good grades, and I was doing a lot of different like special things. They cannot even do it. I thought I am smarter than them. So that discussion never went farther than, khalas, they are boys, like they will be men and they will be providing for the family. They will do this and this, and you are, whatever you do, you are just a girl, and you'll be just a woman, and you will have your own kids. And I thought this is a big thing to have my own kids because I need to raise them. But then that didn't give me any, special status in the society. So growing up, going to the university, I thought very much I want to be a journalist. I have to study to be a journalist, because it wasn't only about women, but I have to say, it was very personal for me, while it was also thing related to all women. You know, I never thought that I am the only one by that stage facing this. I was thinking this way when I was younger. I thought just my family, you know, treating me this way, but not all families think that girls are like less important in any way than boys. So yeah, I focused more when I was in the university. I read more. I felt I have to prove also. That was the, you know, the stress that I can be better than boys and men. And it started at early age, I have to say. Now, when I, you know, I reflect, I think it's a lot of pressure on a girl to think that she has to prove something, to prove that she is good, just to have that special status. Boys who don't do anything or didn't do anything to feel better or feel special, I felt I have to do something else always. And I just discovered that as a girl or a young woman, that I always have to prove something to the society, to my college, to my colleagues, to then even when I am in the like real life, going to the job and then getting married. And in fact, until today, this is for me, it's a matter of fact now that women always needed extra thing to say they are just good, or just good like men. But in fact, they know they are better than men. And of course, you mentioned I ran for the elections, and yes, that happened. And there exactly where I thought this is a matter of fact, of course, because there were a lot of men who were running as candidates. They didn't have half the qualification I had or any other women. So what I discovered during the election, which was this the topic of my PhD later, that's why I focus later on like women political participation, because this political participation was about everything related to women. So during the elections, I felt that all women wouldn't even dare to run or to announce themselves as candidates unless they have something extra. They are actually overqualified comparing to other men. Not every man run for the election was not qualified, but you can imagine in a country like Oman, for example, the last election, 2019, of Majlis Shura, we had over 600 candidates, around 40 only were women. You know, 100% for me that those 40 women are really qualified, okay? And at least they are good if they are not among the best in their communities. But then we had only 2 women who won the election. And both women, in fact, they have a PhD degree, they have long experience in their careers and in their community. So there are a lot of things made me at the personal level, at also my social and political level in Oman, focus and care even more about women's rights and women issues.
Thank you very much, Rafiah, for your interesting overview and for mentioning your experience within a country in which, of course, social growth is a fact, but there are still so many challenges, in particular at within families. You mentioned families. The role of the family is extremely important. Not all the members of the family agree, actually, on the role of women in the public sphere. So you have members supporting more and other, even female maybe, against a more prominent role in society. So this is an interesting point you touched on. And also the fact of underrepresentation of women, of course, within the Majlis Shura, within the political sphere, despite their qualification, because women have been more educated, they have PhDs, they are there to make a difference, and yet they have to find much more barriers and challenges than men.
See, Elena, I would like to mention just one information about, since we talk about the education. So in 2016, I think the Pew Institute released data, and then comparing older generation of females of female education in the Gulf to the generation of that year. So they had and who had more higher education. So young girls, there was increase in their education, like in number, it was 34% increase than the older generation. So that means around 1/3 of young girls got their higher education. And that was the highest increase for all women in the entire Muslim world. That was in the Gulf, okay?
While impressive data, really.
Yeah, and while males in the Gulf, they had increase of 11% only, which is good. But anyway, you can compare it like between 34% increase and 11%. And yet we see women are minority in jobs generally, but in particular in the higher position. There are very few number, and most of the countries, they even refuse to have, percentage for women in the government or in the councils, whether elected or appointed.
And this is really a big issue. But we can come back to these issues in the discussion. So thank you very much for your speech. Now I'd like to give the floor to Mira. And also with you, I'd like to start from your experience within in particular, the new social media in your country. I know that you organized this webinar, Tashirat Dukhul, and you involve young academics and social activists, not only from the UAE, but from the Gulf region, to discuss topics, you say, relevant to the Gulf Street. So Gulf Arab women actually have their own daily problems to deal with. And from abroad, maybe this aspect is not so well perceived, but there are women that have to deal with everyday problems, going to school, going to work, and dealing with their family and the family's tradition and so on. So tell us something about your personal experience and your opinion about the evolving situation in this direction. Thank you, Mira.
Thank you, Elena. So I was prepared to talk a lot of academic stuff, but now I feel intimidated and a little underprepared. So you're going to have to excuse my rambling. And of course, Rafiah set the bar very high. So disclaimer, just to begin with. To answer your question with regards to personal experience, I just had a random flashback based on your question. This happened in 2016 when newspapers, and actually the ruler of Dubai, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, praised the then Minister of State for Education, Her Excellency Jamila Al-Meheri, for cutting short her maternity leave on the 21st day to go back to work to present something for him on that day. And she was coming out of maternity leave. She just had a baby, and this was celebrated as commitment, dedication, as women taking their job seriously. And somehow that didn't sit very well with me. That felt like there was something wrong. I could not articulate why, but over the years I've thought about it. the fact that women and their economic labor and their input is what is celebrated rather than womanhood, their own experience and their own different perspective and what they bring in as women, not what they bring in as gender neutral, even though we don't have anything gender neutral, really, not even in the Gulf. The Gulf is not an exception in the entire world, right? In developing countries, maternity leave extends to 6 months to a year sometimes of paid leave, whereas in the Gulf, for a woman to cut short her maternity leave is hailed as an accomplishment, as a form of sacrifice, as a duty almost. And it's supposed to set an example? I hope not. I would most certainly hope not. And Rafiah knows me, I'm very militant about this opinion, but the UAE, credit where it's due, has really been a pioneer in sort of appointing women to positions of power. And this is very inspirational for young women. In fact, an anecdote I always repeat whenever I go to conferences about women is I conducted this field research in a public university back home. And I asked, to break ice with students, what would you like to be? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And about 80% said, I want to be a minister. And I think the fact that they see a lot of female ministers in the UAE, female ambassadors and public servants holding senior positions is very inspiring. State feminism, with all its shortcomings and drawbacks, actually does have an impact on women's self-perception, self-actualization. They do feel that there is space for them, and then they can contribute to their country's economy or so forth. But then I would never, of course, have the heart to tell these students, how do you endeavor to do that? How do you endeavor to become a minister? Because there's no real pathway for you to become a minister. It's not like you can go and study this subject, take these extracurricular courses, and then, qualify to be a minister. Not even diplomatic training or any sort of training to kind of prepare high-achieving, accomplished women who want to become ministers, to become such. It's really just handpicking in the Gulf, not just in the UAE. And then when these women take on positions of power, do they really represent women? I want to circle back to what happened to the minister who cut short her maternity leave. Do you represent my desires as an, unempowered woman? Would I want to cut my maternity leave and go back to work? And is that my way of, demonstrating my commitment and my work ethics? I hope not. I mean, I'm still waiting for a woman, not only in the UAE, but in the Gulf, an empowered woman, to come and talk about maternity leave and how unfair it is, unfairly short. 3 months, 45 days across the Gulf, give or take. This is not enough. And then, of course, they turn around and talk about women's role as caretakers, the primary duty of women to be homemakers, to take care of their families. They represent, this equilibrium where they have to be homemakers too and do their part in society by raising mentally, intellectually healthy individuals. How do they keep that balance? Because we also have critique of abuse of domestic workers. How do women achieve this balance between work, life, their potential, kind of realize their potential, their economic, political, but also social potential, the domestic potential at home? So this is what I wanted to capture with all this public engagement. These diverse voices that don't get to speak publicly, they're not platformed because they don't benefit the state's narrative with regards to empowerment. Empowerment is really economic, but can we think of empowerment beyond the economy? Thank you.
Thank you, Mira. You touched upon extremely relevant points. Empowerment beyond economic. This is really a great challenge, I think, in the Gulf, and not only in the Gulf, so we'll have time to discuss about it, but You touched upon the sensitive issue of state feminism. Of course, this top-down emancipation process, which of course is not enough, because you need a down-up involvement of all the women's categories, all of them, not only someone from the elite or however the ones chosen by authorities, so by those in power. This is an important point, and you talked about all this by starting from one of the most, I think, sensitive issues for women, maternity leave, so womanhood protection, I think, is a key concept. Womanhood protection within any emancipation process. This is something really to consider carefully. Thank you very much, Mira, for your overview. Now I would like to introduce our distinguished guest, the High Sheriff of Greater Manchester, Mrs. Lorraine Worsley-Carter. She's a former freelance broadcaster, by the way, so she's very well in touch with the media sector, and even if from within a Western dimension. She became a Deputy Lieutenant of Greater Manchester in 2008. She's part of the Greater Manchester Lieutenancy Honours Committee. Lorraine's care for and involvement with the communities of Greater Manchester have seen her undertake the role of CSV's regional manager. So she held many important roles. In 2020, she was chosen as one of the top 100 female entrepreneurs, a celebration of inspirational businesses led by women in the UK. And actually, the role of women within the business sector is another important aspect in the process of women's emancipation all over the world. So she's currently trustee of Family and Babies Charity, ambassador of the Pankhurst Trust, Proud and Loud Arts, and Kidscape Charity. In April 2022, she was installed as High Sheriff of Greater Manchester. She proclaimed the accession of King Charles III in last September. And last November, she received the Personal Purpose Award 2022-23 by She Inspires International Awards. I probably forgot something about your impressive curriculum. I'm really honored to have you here as a special guest, and I'll give you the floor. Looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you, Elena. Hello, everyone, and hello, women of the world, on this very special International Women's Day 2023. Perhaps if I explain a little bit about the role of a High Sheriff. It's a royal appointment, and I am the ceremonial lead of the judiciary for Greater Manchester, the police, the fire service and fire and rescue, the ambulance service, the probation service, the prison service, and very, very involved with communities across Greater Manchester and our 2.8 million citizens. I'm also honoured that I welcome any royal that comes to Greater Manchester, and up to now I have had the honour of welcoming 7 of the royal family, and one of those was the King about a month ago. So really, really busy year. So what have I been doing today? Well, this morning I was at a local council breakfast, and that was brought by the mayoress of the council, the female chief executive of the council, and the newly appointed Dame, Professor Rabina Shah, who was mentioned in the latest honours list and will be having her investiture later in the year. So we had a powerful group of women, but we had poems. We had a woman who has stepped off the cliff from her job as a school teacher to follow her dream of becoming a musician. And it's going to be very difficult. She's in her 40s, but I'm just so in awe of her deciding that she would do that today on International Women's Day. I am very, very fortunate that following talking to all the women of the world who are listening in today, that I will then be meeting for an afternoon tea with some very, very special women, women in the highest ranks of the police force, women in the highest ranks in the law, and women who are the backbone of other organisations that don't get the thank you for all the things they do, but are certainly there to support the women who are in the higher echelons of the organisations that they are in. I have been very, very fortunate to meet lots and lots of young people this year. And in my second month of my role as High Sheriff, I met with a group of school pupils, female school pupils, and I was there to talk about what it's like to have worked in the media for so long. And I have an honour from our late Queen for my work. But no, they wanted to know about my work in the legal profession when I was a magistrate. So not actually in the profession. A magistrate is the first rung of courts within the Crown Prosecution Service. And so I said, well, that's interesting. Why do you want to talk to me about that? And one of the girls said to me, because we'll never ever get to do anything like that in the law, because our family, no one has been to university. So I took that and I challenged it with them. And they this year have been very much part of my year. So they have been to Crown Court. They have met the highest High Court judges in the land, the highest being a female. And they've had the opportunity to sit with her and tell them their story, and she in turn to tell them their story, that no one in her family had been to university either. So here we are, we're here to help. And they have provided mentoring for those girls. I then spoke to them about the Pankhurst Centre and Emmeline Pankhurst, a suffragette who, whilst in Manchester, decided that she would help other women because they needed to get votes for women. So I took them to the centre this week, and they learned that Emmeline Pankhurst's daughter, Christabel, she studied law, but she wasn't allowed to practice law. And so we then went back to the court where Christabel was in a dock. She was in a dock for actually saying, you know, I am here, women should have the vote. And because it was put down as a fact that she had disturbed the peace, there she was in the dock. So we didn't use the dock. We refused to use the Victorian dock where she actually stood, but it gave us the opportunity to talk again with those girls. And to my utmost delight, I was told 2 months ago that the Supreme Court of this land, of the United Kingdom, the International Court, as our Supreme Court is, would sit in Manchester for the very first time ever. And so yesterday I attended the Supreme Court, and I met with the female CEO of the Supreme Court and the Privy Council. So I'm so wanting to go back to the girls that I met 8 months ago, who have lived through all these opportunities to find out about the fact they can go into the law, and tell them that the CEO of the Supreme Court and the Privy Council is a female. And I think that is something to celebrate here on International Women's Day. But I do take your point, Rafiah, because I also have been speaking with first-year students from Manchester University who are looking for a career in the law. And my own daughter, our youngest, she went to university in Paris for 3 years. And I know how difficult it was for her, one, to leave home, to set up in a different country, but also to find your level with all the people that you're meeting from different areas of the world, and feel comfortable, and then think about, I've got all these exams to do. And so I was talking to some of the Muslim young women, and I was asking them how they were feeling, and they echoed everything that our daughter had said. And I said, I can empathise. Well, I can certainly empathise with your mother. But two of those young women said to me, we have also the emotional strain that members of our family are not happy that we are thinking to do this. And they are really hoping that, you know, it's a fad, and we'll get our credentials, and then we'll go back and we won't want to do this, but we will. So I think for all those reasons, we can be very proud of our young people, and they've been so strong, and we're there to back them. This is what we do. This is what we do every day. We've been there. We know how hard it is. Perhaps it's even harder now. Yes, there might be opportunities, but it's still very, very hard for a young woman. But let's hope that we can work together to assist them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorraine, for your inputs and your extremely interesting experience with reference also to the legal dimension, which is a crucial one when it comes to women's rights protection. And this is something true here in Europe and in the Gulf as well. The fact is that in the Gulf, of course, when we come to the jurisprudence dimension, the legal dimension, we come to Islam and the Sharia, the Islamic law. So it is interesting to listen to the ideas of our two speakers, because actually the study of jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence, is still male sector. Women are, as far as I know, at least in the Gulf, Arab countries, they are not involved yet. Although there are some countries in the Arab Muslim world that are starting involving women in the jurisprudence domain. So, and we find some women preachers as well. So, of course, there are so many challenges to involve women in this sector. But what do you think about it? Ask Rafiah and Mira if you have any consideration, any observation on this specific legal domain.
I think, of course, it is very important, and as I mentioned, that was actually a section in my PhD that is very important to change some policies and some laws, because part of the empowerment we talk about in the Gulf of women, it's not only having them appointed, by a royal decree, okay? If there was a quota or a certain percentage reserved for women, that is more empowerment than it depends on the royal or the monarch who decide today to have like 2 women or 3 women or 4 women, and maybe the next will say no, 1 woman is enough, or maybe we don't need women at all. Women's rights should be guaranteed by law. This is very important. And talking about religion and Sharia, Elena, actually, I was really happy to discover while searching and working on my PhD too, that there is this figure, her name is Aisha Riyamiyya, and she's from a well-known family. That she was in the 19th century, I think, in Oman, and she's the only woman, the fuqaha and the ulama of the religion in Oman would respect her and respect her opinion, because she was that much knowledgeable, and she studied, and she was like equal to them. And she was in the books. But what was more interesting for me, that one of the imams who were ruling Oman that time, he kind of wanted to be the imam instead of his cousin, and then he had to have, the consent of the people, mainly what they call them, the tribe sheikhs and the ulama and the fuqaha, and then she is the only one. She was among these, and she was the only woman, and she's the only one who didn't approve, because she thought that was not rightful, and the right person to be the imam of Oman was the cousin. And he couldn't be the imam of Oman until she was convinced that was for the sake of Oman, because Oman that time was, I think, under the occupation of the Portuguese, and then he was stronger than the cousin. So because the condition of Oman wasn't, like perfect or regular, stable situation, after months, she said yes, and then he was announced as the Imam of Oman. So women had this, actually the 18th century, maybe, I don't remember exactly when, but then it is the 18th century, in the 1700s. So that is like around 200 or 300 years ago, where women were that much empowered. And that just because of their knowledge, you see, because of their, knowledge of religion, of politics. And the imam couldn't be imam, although he was powerful, unless she gives, only after she gave her approval. And that is like, for me, when I read it, is just, and now, like the state, okay, when we talk about state feminism, talk about women empowerment, and then that women cannot win, for example, the election, or cannot do that, or cannot deal, they cannot lead their, communities or their countries even, because the society doesn't want or don't accept women. Although there is some truth into this, but I don't buy it all, for 2 reasons. That through the history in Oman, and I think through the history of the Islamic world itself, there were women, distinguished women in our history, who did a lot of things remarkable and distinguished. But then these women weren't on the spots. Even we don't study them in the books. We study different kind of women, but these women who made actually, breakthroughs, with, like Aisha Riyamiyya, for example, as I mentioned, are not highlighted. You just find them by accident if you are searching on that specific issue. So this is one of the things that society not entirely against women, and that is very hopeful. And and to prove that what I see in the Gulf, although many people, or especially the states, would like to say, or the government, that women education can be accredited to the government, because they allow women, they give them the space, they give them the schools, they provide them of this and this. But in fact, like any other thing. If you provide whatever you have, if I don't want to get the education, your buildings, your whatever wouldn't, work. So that the girls wanted to study, the families wanted their girls to study, the communities, they believe in education. And that's why that was very successful in the Gulf, despite like 40, 50 years of the development in the Gulf since we had the oil revolution. But we have to say also that women and girls, they got some kind of informal education, even when school were not there, the formal school as we know them now. I had my mother never been to school, but she reads and writes, and she's like, I wouldn't say well educated the way we say, but then she's well informed because, she studied. And so it's not entirely to the states, and that what, as Mira said, intrigued her, but it's the state feminism and that wants one thing, that people, citizens in the Gulf, to say everything good happened to us just because these governments wanted, us to be better. And every empowerment, aspect should be accredited to them. But all these things wouldn't be, successful if people don't want to do it. But then the state feminism dominate, unfortunately, the thinking and of young people, as also Mira mentioned, because I want to be a minister. What this has to do with my qualifications, like I'm not a doctor, not a teacher, not a journalist. And it doesn't depend on me also. It's not through elections, it's through appointment. And you see, I remember this exactly when I was still young journalist, ambitious and doing all these things and scoops and was happy about myself. People say, one day you will be the Minister of Information. I said, one day I will never be minister in my life. It's like, don't think this way, because this is something we cannot pursue. You see, this is something, it depends on someone's mood who think like, I am from the right family, I have the right direction, I have the enough loyalty, I would be like not a troublemaker in any way. So I don't think, it is inspiring the way, I know Mira didn't want to mean it, but it is sad, in fact, for me to think that young girls would think one day they want to be ministers. You see, because the path to it is not only to have good education, but also a package of other things you might not want to do, because in this case, you might not be able to do the change you think you can do to your society. So one more thing is about top-down and down-top policies. As also Lorena explained, down-top gains are more sustainable because that will come from the ground, from the people. They wanted this, and they will, in a way, they will force the state to change the laws, change the policies, and make them better, more convenient, more appropriate for women. I don't have to go to work when I am still like 1 month and a half, as Mira mentioned, like in the Gulf, we have 1 month and a half or 45 days exactly, and then we have to go back to work. I should have 6 months at all, instead of accumulating my annual leave just to have it after my maternity leave, and then I have to go. And not only this, I have to go and pretend that I am like the man. I am not like the man. I don't want to be like the man and work normally. I still have to breastfeed my kids. And then when they give women 1 hour, we call it sa'at rida'a, 1 hour of breastfeeding. What can 1 hour do for women, for example? They will go by the end of the day, but then actually it depends where you live. So we don't have, for example, daycare close to the work. And there is, why the states in the Gulf don't make work environments friendly to women and mothers. You see, this will be more empowering for women. No, instead of letting them feel guilty because they are mothers, guilty because they are women. And then they have not only this, but they have also to pretend like they can do things like men. They are not like men. They have more obligations, and they can be more productive and more, let's say, happier while doing these things, because they don't deny who they are. They are mothers. They are doing other jobs for the community, for the society, for themselves even, but then the Gulf states and the government, yet they don't do what it matters. They do these cosmetic things to make them look good for the international community, but they don't change substantial laws or policies which are very much demanded and needed in the Gulf. We are happy that people see us like, economically they are better than Arab countries, but in fact, this is not the truth even about all the Gulf countries. Oman, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, women are less fortunate. Unemployment, for example, in Oman among women is very high, as it is very high also among men. So what kind of empowerment, we get if we have only the reputation that we are oil-producing countries?
Thank you very much, Rafiah. You've been discussing about extremely important aspects, because actually this down-top emancipation is something that the Gulf really needs, and that also I think at least Italy needs as well. And because actually the narrative tends to be gender neutral when it comes to the labor market and the careers, but the protection of the womanhood, as underlined by Mira also before, is an extremely relevant point. So I would like to ask Mira, who is directly involved in the new social media, and I know that in the Gulf, for instance, Twitter has been growing so much, so I'd like to ask, are this new social media in a way contributing effectively to spread consciousness among women about the importance of this down-top approach, and to get them involved in initiatives, in a way helping to change things, to address some challenges? What are the debates of the Gulf Street about, apart from the maternity leave, but also other legal issues, I suppose, also the issue of abuses, for instance, within the family, or you mentioned the foreign domestic workers, or there is another important issue for the Gulf, for instance, the granting of citizenship by national women married to non-national, which is still highly debated in the region, although Gulf Arab women married to non-nationals are not great numbers, but some of them are there. So can you tell us something about your perception about these issues? Thank you.
Thanks, Elena. So first of all, I don't claim to represent the Gulf Street. I'd like to platform the Gulf Street, but I don't necessarily speak on its behalf. But just from general observations, when you say, has social media changed things in terms of raising awareness? Surely, but we can't necessarily generalize, because women, depending on class, race, social status, and all these other factors, see themselves in very different positions. So a woman who is not married to a foreigner will not necessarily be concerned with the issue of citizenship. So these are not issues that will have all strata of society coalescing around it. It doesn't affect everyone evenly. And we don't have necessarily a solid culture of civil society whereby you sign up to a theme or to a value or a principle of freedom or equality, and then you kind of stick to it regardless of who is at the receiving end and who you are defending at that point in time, even when it intersects with your own interests, let's say. And we don't have that culture, because bottom down, actually, it goes back in history. I would say it's convenient to say it's an issue with Islam, but I have a problem with I will problematize this convenient excuse. I don't think it is religion. I don't even think it is society, if you want the truth. I think really it is the state. The state maintains the patriarchy. The state, it is in the interest of the state that to maintain the status quo. It is in the interest of the state at the same time not to grant citizenship or not to allow women to pass on citizenship, because why expand the recipients of the pie? You have a pie in welfare states. Why expand it? Bring in new people, especially bring in new people, indiscriminately, whereas states can choose who to naturalize. We like you, we think you're going to be economically productive, so we are going to give you membership, whereas giving indiscriminately to new people, that is problematic. And especially people who they assume, because loyalty and membership to the state versus membership to the tribe, et cetera, they all intersect in the Gulf. It's not a matter of religion. Nowhere in religion or religious text does it say women cannot pass on citizenship. This is a civilian matter. This is a civil matter. It has nothing to do with religion. It does not contradict any ethos within religion. This is a state mandate. And it really is to the benefit of the state not to allow women to pass on citizenship, unless that citizenship comes with no expectations. If citizenship is granted to someone who is going to pay tax, sure, the government will readily provide citizenship and allow women to pass on citizenship, not only to their children, but to their husbands and husbands' families, maybe. The more people pay tax, the better for the government. But while the government subsidizes living, provides welfare for citizens, it does not make sense for the states to allow women to pass on citizenship. But then again, I want to talk about society. We tend to blame society or religion. They're conservative, they're overly conservative, they hinder women from achieving or realizing their dreams. Actually, society is also the victim of state policies with regards to education, with regards to conservatism, openness, and stuff like that. So when the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran happened, the entire Gulf adopted a counter-revolution Sunni sort of Islamism or conservatism to counter the religious conservatism of the Shia bloc. Of course, society was indoctrinated through education, through public discourse, to become more conservative. So it's really not society that decided to kind of adopt this conservatism that hinders women. It is the top-bottom mandate throughout and continues to be. Where is society here? Without civil society, without that culture of speaking upwards rather than kind of waiting for things to cascade down, we can't expect society to change, and we should not be blaming society when it has no agency in this. I think we should be speaking to states and asking them, what are you doing? How are you, this empowerment facade allows the state to suspend the conversation about equality. Because you tick boxes, you appear on rankings for equality, you have a picture, a nice picture, group picture where you have equal number of men and women, but where is the access? Is this equal in terms of everything? Not really. I'm a mother to a non-Emirati child, and I have to pay a portion of my salary to renew his visa, to pay for his education because he can't access, well, starting this year, he can access in the UAE, public healthcare and public education. But before that, I had to pay for everything. And I fork out a big portion of my salary for that. And where's the fairness? Before that, before last year, women in the UAE were not guaranteed equal pay as men. So despite not being paid equally as men, I had to also pay for visas for my son. So there's so many issues. And I don't think it is society. We should not be blaming society. We should be speaking back to the state and asking, why are you doing this?
Thank you, Mira. I think that you already answered that to one of the questions I see in the chat by Emily, who asked, can the speakers talk more about state feminism? What does it mean exactly, and where does that come from, and how it does conflict with women empowerment, which is something that you explained now very well. as state feminism really is a barrier to women empowerment in the end. I don't know if Rafiah would like to add anything on this.
Yeah. In fact, I do, because I think this is a very sensitive issue in the Gulf, and that I'm happy that Mira, agree with me on this, and I agree with her totally that it's the state we should blame, and this is the result of all my, research, reading, observations, in my experience. So, why state feminism is very important, like to us, because actually it ruins women achievements. First, any accreditation or any, victory, if we have to say, it's always given to the state, you see. And unfortunately, since the states, the Gulf states are rentier states, that's how, this relationship became a little bit more complicated. The state provided a lot of services and incentives and privileges for the people. And then people became afraid to lose these things, free education, free healthcare, and many other things. And then, so when you criticize the state, criticize the government or something, you might lose a lot of things. Many, for example, young people would go on scholarships to study abroad. So if you say something, it's easily, they will cut your scholarship. So it's better to remain loyal or silent, not to say anything. So going back to specifically women and women issues and women rights. So as I mentioned, most of the things they happened as gifts, you see, and presents from the monarch, but not as law and policy. And this is the problem, that not all women can enjoy. They will find a royal degree deciding this and that this year, and maybe this year this will change. That's why it's very important, the pressure that comes from the society. But if this pressure, it's not coming, the state and the state people should be aware, okay, of the steps to empowerment, to empower women. It's not only giving them the, the high positions, and mostly these high positions without even power. We have to look into these also positions where they are in the hierarchy of the authority itself. You will find them, they are like in the bottom of the hierarchy, and there is someone else would make the main decision for them. So, for example, why we don't have a longer maternity leave again? Why we don't, for example, have more hours for women or mothers who breastfeeding their kids? These are very simple things that these women go to work every day, like teachers, women in the health sector, because more women in the Gulf, the biggest two sectors where women work, health sector and the education. Why even in these two sectors we don't have facilities for women, to do their job better? So the state feminism hijack everything. For example, in Oman, we have one name for women association, and that is Omani Women Association, and we have 60 of them in every district in Oman. But then they all under the supervision of the Ministry of Social Development. They have subsidies from the social development from this ministry. So if they want to do any say event or anything, they have to get the permission from the ministry. So if they want to invite any guest to talk, also they have to have the permission. So if someone says something might not be agreeable, or maybe upset someone in the authorities or even in that ministry, they don't do their event and do nothing. So women actually not free in choosing what it matters for them. So these women association and other association, especially association that thrive in the Gulf, usually they are either related directly to the government or they are charities. And even these charities, when they are too independent, they will face a lot of challenges, because again, the government, while they don't want to give now a lot of things to the people like services, and then organizations or other people will step and will want to provide these. Also, the government, they don't want to see an alternative for their role, because this is power. So state feminism is dangerous, I think, while it's good, while we agree that unfortunately in the Gulf is top-down policies. So at least they should do what it matters, okay? Quota would help, facilities for women would help, acknowledging that they have, okay, different gender roles as mothers, they should acknowledge this thing. But more than that is that until now, all the state, they don't acknowledge that women are equal citizens like men. They, in many laws in all these countries, still treating women differently by law, by their policies than men. And that always sends one message to women, and that is first, a woman is a second-class citizen because they don't have all rights, and also they don't have even the power to do what they want. So the choice component here also is not there. So, you know, before we start this speech or this event today, we should, send some greeting to women because it is the International Women's Day. So for me, it is always not about celebrating, but about remembering what we should do for women, you know, or for ourselves, and whom to target. You know, and in the Gulf, for me, the target is the state, because the state wanted to be in this position, who gives and who take, you see? So why you don't give us what we want? And one more thing, it is much easier for the state, for government to say, it's not us to blame, it's the society, it's the community, because they don't want women for this position. But then when they appoint all these women, whether in Oman or the United Arab Emirates, you see, nobody would say no for this, the government or for the monarch. When the royal degrees come and their daughters are on this position, everyone is happy, right? So there is no resistance, there is no refusal for any woman was appointed for this high position at all. And they also, we are aware that these women are, you know, either from a wealthy, prestigious family or comes from certain tribe in the country. And so not all women, even if they are inspired, they might get the same, you know, opportunity to be one day a minister by a royal degree. So it's easier for the government, as I mentioned, to say that it's the community. Because why? Because they don't want to do what they're supposed to do, changing policies, issuing new laws. But the problem is that this government is part of the society. These men who are, you know, dominating the government, also part of this society, they are blaming. So why they don't, you know, first take the blame and do something about it? So even when they blame the society, in fact, they are blaming the government. The government is not something totally separate from these men. They have wives, they have daughters, they have sisters whom they should, you know, seek to empower and give them the proper environment that enable them to do what they believe they should do as women, to you know, pursue career that they want, to change social norms, to you know, dream of leading their societies or communities, or you know, doing whatever in their lives. And I think if there is one, you know, body that we should, is the government, is the state, because they want to do everything and they let them do the right thing for women.
Thank you, Rafiah, for your comments. Well, I see that the audience is very involved and interested in the discussion. So, but before turning to the other questions, I would like to thank the High Sheriff of Greater Manchester, who had to leave us, but we really appreciated her speech and contribution. So thank you very much again to her. And so we can continue with the discussion. Here I see a question from Chanel Nada, saying, "You are amazing women. Do you think that openness experienced by Gulf society targets the openness you experienced as well in your life, targets the privacy of the culture and the tradition of the Gulf families and society. How do families, in particular, the most traditional families, look at this openness? I think this is what she means. Mira, or Mira, would you like to answer, or and then Rafiah, or?
I'm happy to jump in. I mean, the question, if I understand correctly, does this openness undermine traditional values and infringes on the privacy of the family? Well, to be honest, the conservativeness, as I stated earlier, is semi-manufactured. Yes, we are a conservative society to a certain degree, organically conservative, but also part of it was manufactured by the state. And if we trace back all these the shifts in society that coincided with changes, we were at the cusp. I was at the cusp of a huge transition in the 2000s when a university, a bachelor's degree offering university was opened, a public university, it was opened in Dubai. The only one at that point that offered bachelor's degree before the year 1997 was actually in Al Ain, which was very far. And yet my mother and her sisters did actually benefit from an education because of their father. Not because the monarch said, send your daughters. He did say, send your daughters. Not everybody did. But my grandfather, somehow a very conservative man, still is, may Allah protect him. He was okay with them going that far for an education because their brothers went with them. But there are limits, right? What these shifts in society also kind of help families change their perspectives. So my parents were not necessarily on board with me studying overseas at first, and then slowly with society changing, their network, people sending their daughters overseas.
Oh, I thought I better call you people before my battery dies. So
sorry. Sorry. Okay, I lost my trail of thought, but yeah, my parents were not necessarily first on board, but when you see society changing around you, you also kind of like, you know, you accommodate, you adjust to these changes, and adjustments happen. They do happen gradually, they do happen slowly. They're not evenly distributed across different, you know, not in urban places or the city versus the countryside. It doesn't happen evenly, but it does happen with a lot of interaction, people moving to work in the city, going back home to you know, the peripheries, and then kind of taking these new ideas with them. In the past, you wouldn't see women from the Northern Emirates working even as far as Dubai or Abu Dhabi, but now they do, and they commute, and they even stay during the working week in different Emirates and then go home. Things do change, and I don't think when it happens organically, I don't think there's an infringement on the privacy or the values of society or the family.
Thank you very much. Rafiah, would you like to add anything about this?
Yes, something similar like that happened also in Oman. And that's why it's very important that any change, social change, it comes from the society and from the community itself. So why also the Omanis prefer that their daughters will study education to become teachers, because when it is started in the 70s and the 80s, there were a lot of new schools, and then they needed the daughters and the sons of that specific district to work, you know, in these schools. So they needed a lot of Omanis, whether they are males or females, to work there. So we had the majority of the students, most of the students in, for example, Sultan Qaboos University, where I studied, were like studying in the education, College of Education. So we had too many teachers. Anyway, most of them are female. And then things changed. Not all district needed, you know, and now not all district need new teachers, whether female or male. So now female teachers will be working, you know, somewhere like in Salala Dhufar, which is 1,000-kilometer, 10 hours to drive from Muscat, for example, and maybe it's farther from other, districts in Oman. And we, as also Mira mentioned, some family wouldn't imagine that their daughters will study somewhere far from them, and then or studying abroad, or then work far from home, you see. And now they are married and they have kids, and they will leave their kids, in fact, with their family, and they will go and work somewhere else, and they will come by the end of the week. Those who work, for example, in Salalah, Dhufar, south of Oman, very far, they can't come every week, you see, and they will stay even longer, like by month. So this change is organic, and coming people realize that economically they need the women, the female, whether she's a wife or a sister or a daughter, to work, and this is the only opportunity available, and it's not anymore close to their house, and it's just a few steps away, you see, and this is very important. So if we talk about this openness, Mira and I, we are not the only, I think a lot and many, and I can say maybe at least, I don't have numbers, but what I feel from women I know, a lot of women in the Gulf, they are just like us, and families, they know now that their daughters, they are, in a way, they are equal to their, sons, because they can, in fact, provide, and that's what made men historically maybe in the world gain this status, because they can always provide for their families. And now there is nothing special about them, you see, like whatever they can do, we can do, and maybe we can do it better. So yes, I don't think that we provoke, like traditions or religion, or the privacy of the family, because families, they decide for themselves. And then the girls or the women in these families, they have this debate and discussions and conflicts sometimes within their families. They don't want the state, to control or to regulate their lives. And this is very important when we should have this tough conversations anyway, because we know this is change, and this change will affect not only our lives, it's the next generation lives. What was very difficult for me to do, it was much easier for my sisters, and much easier, of course, for my daughters to do. You see, my daughters are studying abroad when I didn't even dream to study abroad, because even when I was then one of the top students in the entire country, but then I excluded the idea because I know from the beginning that my family wouldn't let me go and study somewhere. So Sultan Qaboos University was like the greatest dream, and it was good for me to study there. I wouldn't say that it wasn't a good experience, but then things just changed within like 20, 30 years, because people believe that life is changing. Girls are doing a lot of things that prove they can, be independent and also dependable, to their families. One more thing, when I was thinking about this event, I was thinking of talking about something under this title: what makes us scared discussing issues, discussing women's rights in the Gulf. And actually, there are like mainly two issues, like religion and tradition, because always when we say something about women's rights, they will tell us, like in the Quran says this, Prophet Muhammad says this, and then the problem is that even when you want to discuss these verses and this saying of Prophet Muhammad, they wouldn't allow you to think and discuss it, because it's so sacred, even though the Quran itself tells us to think and discuss it, you see. But then you always, especially when you are younger, you don't have the confidence, you don't have the knowledge, and you just hear all these saying about women and you don't agree with it, but then you don't agree with the people, or you don't agree with Allah, for example, or you don't agree with your, to your religion. And then of course the tradition where you see yourself thinking differently. And when you talk to other girls, oh, Rafiah, this is dangerous, we cannot think about this, or we cannot discuss this with our family. And then you feel you are alone, you see. And then the problem that you feel always you are on the wrong side. Why you are thinking this way? There is something wrong in my mind. But then, of course, when you grow up, you read, you understand there are other women. Even now, they are not in your community or society. They are not your friends. They are somewhere in the world, and they are facing the same thing. This is very, I have to say, inspiring and empowering, because there are other women everywhere in the world who went through similar, challenges, similar difficulties, similar feeling about being alone and cannot change or cannot even choose what they want for themselves. So I think now in the Gulf, people are much more open. And as Mira and I said before, now it's the role of the state, to meet the people aspiration, meet what actually people want. You see, we witness now in the Gulf more oppression, more restrictions on the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, because actually people now saying loudly, at least through the social media, where they cannot express in the mainstream media, which most of them state-owned or owned by, companies or wealthy people and business people who are loyal to the government or to the state. So they don't want to hear the people's demands, you see, and they want to suppress them. And that means that the society in the Gulf is actually growing and developing faster than the state wants. And this is very dangerous. And that's why everything is restricted now more than ever. And what I think, if the Gulf states want really to empower women and empower their own citizens, they should give them first equal rights and then give them all citizenship rights to participate and engage politically as it's supposed to be, and have some kind of reforms and democratization steps through these councils, which are already built. They are building in the Gulf, but they don't function as, parliament or democratic institutions. We don't hear you, Elena. You are muted. You are muted.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you very much, Rafiah, for your comments. No doubt the empowerment of women, the real empowerment of women cannot be conceived without freedom, without the respect of rights, both of men and women, and in every domain. Now we have almost run out of time. There was another question regarding women who are not allowed to pass their citizenship to children if married to non-national. And apart from the economic reasons, I don't find the name of the person who's asking this, but however, he or she asks, do you think that there are political reasons? How about political reasons? Do you think that political reasons are related with the ongoing conflict that may be between states in the Gulf? Because there are women married to other Gulf states citizens. I don't know if one of you wants to say something about this. I would say that, of course, there are, because actually I mentioned this thing, there are, of course, political issues as well. In particular, the main problem regarding the passing of citizenship is related to women who may be married to expatriates, non-nationals. So because non-nationals are in these countries on a contract basis. And well, giving them citizenship would change deeply some dynamics. I mean, this issue was tackled in particular in an interesting study carried out by the Women's Research and Study Centers of the University of Kuwait. And here I would like just to conclude and quote something from this work. It could be argued that national women married to non-nationals are excluded from granting citizenship more as an enforcement of a tribal tradition rather than an Islamic one. This reflects the fear that granting citizenship to the children of a national woman married to non-nationals will cause demographic confusion or diffuse national or tribal identity. Demographic confusion related to the demographic structure of these countries, where expatriates, in some of them, are the majority. In particular, in the UAE, they are the majority expatriate workers. So, but now we have run out of time. So, if Rafiah, Mira, would you like to add anything?
It is Mira's topic. I can comment later, but I think Mira should talk about since she had the experience.
This is, like you said, this question deserves a lengthy answer, but yeah. I think it's a combination of so many factors. The demographic ambivalence, if you will, it's not just about women and who they pass citizenship to, but also the truth is these are tribal societies, and what happened in Qatar very recently with regards to the elections of the Shura Council, when a group of members of a certain tribe were excluded from voting. They were not allowed to vote because they were not considered citizens enough. The timeline by which they were granted citizenship conflicted with the timeline of the state. So the idea is these states are still not very certain about their borders. In fact, a few days ago, Saudi Arabia celebrated its National Day and circulated a map of its borders, of its ancient borders. And this map included certain Gulf countries, including my own, and people were very upset about it. So there's so many contentious issues that are unresolved. One of them could be borders. Yes, it could be political, it could be economic, but one thing for sure, beyond all these things, any work related to women is criminalized in the Gulf. And we have Lujain al-Hadlul as an example. I mean, sure, women were granted the right to drive, but then suddenly she became a criminal in the eyes of the states and society too. She was scapegoated because she asked for what was granted very soon afterwards. So it's just the state is a very contradictory entity. And from very personal experience, I remember a state official came to speak to me in Cambridge because of my writings and to make sure that I am not being very dissident-y and bad. And the first thing he did was display a few books in front of me to supposedly gauge my political religious orientations. And one of the books was a book by Judith Butler. And I think he was trying to determine whether I was a feminist. And I almost laughed because it tells you how the state thinks, and it's very contradictory and it's very simple. I think the state thinks it's very sophisticated and it's very mature and everybody infantilizes everybody else. But then the behavior of the state says very different things sometimes.
Thank
I
you.
hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. And I thank you, everyone. And first of all, our speakers. And it was great celebrating this International Women's Day with you and by participating in this special event. So thanks, everybody. Thanks to MACFEST. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye.